I got up from the bed in the dark. A noise snapped me out of my sleep. I reached over to my bedside table to unwrap the alarm clock. Dimly glowing on it were the numbers. 3 o'clock, I moaned. Now I had to sleep sweetly, forgetting what had woken me. I turned to the wall and settled myself comfortably in bed when the sound came again. The dull thud of footsteps in the attic, directly above me, loud and deliberate, as if someone is walking around the attic and wants to make his presence known. I jumped out of bed, my heart pounding wildly. Someone was in my house. The footsteps stopped over my closet. I was standing in the middle of a dark room, the light from the clock illuminating only the bedside table on which it stood. I slowly left the room and walked along the corridor towards the closet, from which I took out an old bat. I again went out into the corridor and began to observe the stairs leading to the attic. Whoever my intruder was, he couldn't get away. I held my breath, listening to the noises. Nothing. I slowly approached the stairs. The light was on in the attic. I didn't remember if I went up to the attic today. Maybe I forgot to turn it off. As quietly as possible, I climbed the stairs and peered into the cramped attic to see that no one was there. Just old rubbish. I breathed a sigh of relief. Probably. It seemed to me that when you are alone in the dark, different sounds often appear. Smiling, I turned off the light and went back to bed. I had barely closed my eyes when the spanking came again, just as loud as before, but this time closer to the center of the room. I jumped up, more angry than frightened, and rushed up the stairs, bat in hand. I kicked over the boxes, hitting a pile of old clothes. Nothing. I massaged my temples as I walked down the stairs. I spend too much nerves at work, probably. It's better to take a day off tomorrow. As I approached the door to my room, I felt strange. Fear washed over me. I stopped, reaching out for the doorknob, but immediately pulled myself back. I'm acting stupid. I need to sleep and I'll feel better. Rubbing the bridge of my nose, I turned on the light and got into bed. Slap. I abruptly tore my hands away from my face, looking at the ceiling. Now, with the lights on, I saw him. His body seemed to be a mockery of the human form. It was bent and twisted, his head turned at an unnatural angle, empty gaps where his eyes should have been. Before my eyes, it slapped its palm on the ceiling and pulled itself closer to me. Slap. I let out a panicked laugh as it shattered the light bulb in the ceiling, the only source of light, plunging the room into darkness. I didn't go crazy. How was I to know? Slap. It walked across the ceiling. Once, after a long day of wandering through the forest, a hunter was caught at night in the middle of a thicket. It was already dark, and, having no idea of his whereabouts, he decided to walk in one direction until he came out of the forest. After several hours of walking, he came to a small clearing, in the middle of which was a hut. Realizing that he had no choice, he decided to stay at the hut for the night. The door was open and no one was inside. The hunter lay down on the only bed. Looking around the hut, the hunter was surprised to find that the walls were decorated with several portraits, painted in great detail. Without exception, all the faces in the portraits looked angrily and menacingly. The hunter felt uncomfortable, ignoring the faces in the portraits that looked at him with hatred. He turned his head to the wall and quickly fell asleep. The next morning he woke up to bright sunlight. Looking around, he saw that there were no portraits in the hut, only windows. A friend's grandfather worked as a watchman at the cemetery, and he told me this story. One night, grandfather, as usual, was walking along the path between the new graves. The vandals mostly hunt them, when he suddenly heard a muffled but heart-rending scream. Grandfather went to the cry and stumbled upon a completely fresh grave without a tombstone. Not believing his ears, he bent over her. The scream really came from the ground. Grandfather was afraid that, perhaps, a person was buried alive, which just does not happen. But when he called the rescuers and they dug up the grave, they did not find anyone in the coffin. It was empty. To whom the grave belonged has never been established. Who needed to bury an empty coffin is also unknown. And then the grandfather wrote off the scream as it seemed. He really didn't believe in all these stories about the living dead and other mysticism. As a child, I was often tormented by one nightmare. Late in the evening, my mother was washing dishes in the kitchen, and then there was a knock on the front door. I go to open it. I go to the door and I hear a quiet but distinct whisper from there. Open it. Hands are shaking. It's getting so scary. The whisper continues. Come on, open Abolda. I'll go in anyway. Come on, open, open. I run to my mother, pulling her sleeve. Mom reluctantly approaches the door, but does not hear a knock or a whisper. She turns around and goes about her business further, and I remain at the door, breathing a sigh of relief. I turn to go into my room, and then another knock and an insinuating whisper. See, open, but it wasn't just in a dream. Sometimes at night I woke up from a soft knock on the window. We lived on the 8th floor without a balcony. Rising up on the bed, I saw a thin long finger, which softly tapped on the window, and I heard a familiar whisper. Open. Do not believe, laugh, come up with explanations. But I know it's true, although now even to myself, sometimes it seems like a stupid fear inspired by a child's imagination. But lately, this half-forgotten fear haunts me with renewed vigor, making me tremble under the covers on dark nights, because for the third night my daughter wakes me up, with tears in her eyes, talking about a creature that knocks on the window and whispers, "Open," and I don't know how to help her.